Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And today we have a wonderful guest, Emma Farrell. She is a plant spirit healer, geomancer, and author. Emma has held plant retreats and ceremonies in England and Wales. She holds a master's degree in the preservation and development of wisdom culture and the art of liberation in the Tibetan Buddhist Mahayana tradition, writing her thesis on understanding the nature of the self through lucid dreaming. And we're going to be talking today about Emma's new book, beautiful book, called Journeys with Plant Spirits. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emma.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your show. It's a real honor.
Let's go back in time and talk about what led you to be in this realm of plant communication and what in the world is geomancy. You might want to explain to our guests.
Okay, well, I arrived in the world of plant spirits in quite a convoluted way, but it was an amalgamation of my previous study, my interest in spirituality, my interest in consciousness expansion, and through a series of synchronicities, I was led to some plant ceremonies that were being held to see how meditators and people who were deeply on their spiritual path would respond to working with with teacher plants. And when this happened, it completely shattered my paradigm and completely catapulted me into a whole new dynamic of communication in the spirit realm, and particularly with plant spirits. And through that experience, I was able to then run an event about this because I was just so blown away that you could sit and have a conversation with the spirit of a plant and a tree. And it was through that event that I ran that I met Pam Montgomery, who is a plant spirit healer from Vermont, actually. And she taught me the methodology of healing with plant spirits, and I've developed it from there. And so I also combine it a little bit with geomancy as well. And geomancy is it's a way of working with earth energies, because when you work with the plants, they don't sit in isolation. You know, they sit within the life force of the earth where they grow and the telluric forces that flow through them. So there's quite a crossover there between working with the spirits of the land and the spirits of the plant and trees. And so they work very beautifully together. So that's, in a nutshell, how I started on this path.
Well, that's an interesting journey. And of course, I'm sure a lot of it had to do with your own intuitive interactions just with the universe and with life in general. But as we talk about this topic, although it has a very deep focus in spirituality, it is more and more supported by scientific studies. I would say in the last 20 years, and even more so in the last few years, where they've been able to actually have machines that document the sounds that plants make. And they've been able to, because of computer technology, bring it into where it is audible for humans. And so many scientific investigations into what they call the wood wide web, which has to do with transducer molecules that are released by the mycelia on plants' roots that are able to communicate to other plants, send both chemical messages, sound messages, and in a whole lot of other ways communicate more than we would have thought before.
That's true. And it was Damina University in Italy where I first came across this, the music of the plants, where they'd created this device that would hook up to plants and transform the resonance and the pulses of the life force of the plant into the harmonic scale. And it brings the plant alive, and the plant can really start to hear itself. It's like giving a baby a voice. A baby doesn't realize that the sound it's making perhaps is its own voice to start with, but gradually it gets used to it and then learns language, learns to control it. And it's very similar with the plants as well. By giving them this voice of music, they start to play with it over a certain amount of time. And you can see that you can really start to feel the consciousness of the plants. And they even do concerts, with plants and musicians, and where they play together in harmony. It's absolutely beautiful. And what it does is really viscerally shows the consciousness of plants and trees, so that people can experience it in a really direct way. And it's stunning. It's so beautiful. And of course, there's been lots of research by amazing people like Suzanne Simard, who did that research into how trees communicate with each other, and the matriarchal tree of the forest, and how the different different trees play different roles within the forest. And of course, yes, how they communicate through that mycelial web. And so all of this information is just kind of adding to the kind of the expansion and awareness of plant consciousness today.
So I want to point people to your beautiful book. I mean, I just love the cover. It's called Journeys with Plant Spirits, Plant Consciousness Healing. And you also bring in the concept of magic as well, and natural magic practices. So are you talking about some, let's say, things that you can do with plants to promote a conscious attempt to make something happen? Sometimes that's called a spell.
Absolutely. When you spend time in the realm of plants, and particularly working with their metaphysical aspect, and not just their physical aspect, but the more spiritual side of plants, you can't really miss the fact that it's very magical. And so magic in its kind of natural state is the transforming of energy through intention. And that's exactly how you work with plant spirits. And so we can work with the spirits of the plant through intention within a ceremonial aspect. So I go into the ceremony and working with the medicine wheel in the book to use that as the ritual kind of basis.
Well, you and I know what a medicine wheel is, but we may have listeners who never heard that term before. So why don't we define that?
Absolutely. Sorry. So a medicine wheel is the cross within a circle. That's the symbol of the medicine wheel. It's the cross quarters. It's the fairy crossroads. It's it's the compass, the north, south, east, and west cross with a circle around it. So this symbol and this kind of device, if you like, is used can be used as an altar. So, and it's basically when we call in the 7 directions, the shamanic process of opening sacred space and calling in the 7 directions, we can use this symbol of the directions, which is a 2D format of it, in our healing practice. And we can, within that symbol is all the platonic solids, all of the directions of our known universe, and so we can call in those aspects to really open a beautiful, safe space. And I'd call it a medicine wheel. And it can be used for many different reasons. It can be used for projects. It can be worked with to literally sink yourself into the cycles of the season as we journey through the year, because each direction corresponds to a different element, to a different season, to a different color, to a different energy, to a different time in your life.
Let's go deeper into that concept. Pick one direction, right? And let us know, what are some of those correspondences, such as season and color, with one of the directions?
Sure. So the west direction, the direction of the west in the traditional Celtic shamanic medicine wheel that I work with, because there are lots of different medicine wheels all around the world. It's a tradition without beginning. It's a true tradition.
Isn't that interesting when we see that repetitive pattern throughout different times and different traditions?
Isn't it? It just shows you that it's almost like an archetype that comes from within us. And actually in the British Isles, it comes from the fairy tradition. It's called the Fairy Crossroads. So it's a really ancient mnemonic device. But so the west direction, that's associated with water in my tradition. So the water element, with the undines. The undines are the nature spirits that live in the water. They're the water spirits. And so it's associated with the twilight, with autumn, with the setting sun. It's associated with the water beings, so the fishes, the dolphins, the whales, but also associated with the fishes in the rivers, in our lakes and streams. So the West is a very watery, beautiful watery realm. And we've also got in the Celtic shamanic tradition, we've got the great sea god, Manannan MacLear, and he's the god of magic, and he's the god that guards the coastlines and shores of the British Isles, which are renowned to be very magical islands for a long, long time. So all of these kind of beings and associations and correspondences all kind of interweave and connect. And when you get to know them and really immerse yourself in that particular element and get to know it as an inner element within yourself, because as we know, the waters are associated with our emotions. So once we get to know our inner water element, that subtle water element within ourselves, then we can start to really work with each of the directions in this very interactive and immersive way. And so for the opposite side of the wheel to that is the east. And that's the rising sun. It's the springtime. It's the air elementals, the sylphs, they're called. And it's associated with the birds of the sky and the mind. And so it's in fluidity, and so it's got a different quality and a different set of correspondences. And so when it comes to the plants, we have each of the plants themselves are associated with particular elements and therefore different directions and correspondences. And this is how we get to understand the plant spirits themselves and how they work according to the types of energies that they express more strongly.
Well, I think that's, it is so universal, and thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking of so many other traditions, like Native American traditions, that actually mirror a lot of those thoughts, but perhaps with a different plant and a different entity, or the Santeria tradition, which might look at something like Yamaya, which is a water-based spirit entity that we can communicate with. So that pattern is really so common throughout human history that it always surprises me when people haven't come across it, because it's really grounding and healing. And for instance, in your particular case, you share in your book that you had very severe asthma and hay fever as a child. And how did this kind of revelation help you with your health and physical well-being?
Yeah, I suffered from a lot of autoimmune issues, particularly as a child. And it was one of the motivations for my parents moving from the north of England down to the southwest, where the air was much cleaner. It's quite industrial in the north of England. And because I was so sick with asthma and hay fever, etc., when I moved down to Cornwall, I just seemed to get better. It was a much better environment for me. But as I grew older, I never fully cured I might have grown out of the autoimmune issues, or they just kind of transformed inside me, but I didn't necessarily cure them. And it wasn't until I started understanding how to properly heal something within you that you have to approach it from all the different, from a holistic perspective, from all different angles. So that's the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. And so because every pain in our body is an expression of our subconscious trying to get our attention about something. And so it's very much a case of being able to dive into the subconscious to see what the subconscious is trying to tell you. And quite often it's to reveal that there's a blind spot, there's a trauma, there's an unresolved emotion down there that needs to be heard and needs to be seen. And the plants themselves are able to do this for us and really help us to see and take us down into those depths and bring either inspiration so that we can remember what those wounds are and to see them with new adult eyes, or they reflect our consciousness back at us so we're able to see ourselves much more clearly. And just by bringing that light of awareness to these blind spots in our psyche, it's almost like it just releases the power that these traumas have over us. And so we can start to kind of unravel these behavioral patterns or these kind of defensive mechanisms that we've built around ourselves to protect ourselves from the wounds that we've experienced through mainly childhood and early adulthood. So the plant spirits are just really fundamental in that work. And when you approach working with plants from that spiritual level, working with their soul force and not just with their physical aspect, but with their soul aspect, then you can heal at a soul level within yourself. And that's where a lot of issues like autoimmune issues, which are really deeply embedded in the limbic part of the mind, the limbic part of the brain, then, you can really get down to the source and the origin of your misaligned energy or issue and heal it at its origin. And that's where true healing takes place.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'd like our listeners to know that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And today my guest is Emma Farrell, and she is the author of a beautiful new book, which is called Journeys with Plant Spirits. And a lot of what we're talking about today, she goes into in great depth, and even the name of the chapters, such as returning to this plant spirit path, and the plant spirit path to self-realization and becoming the plant medicine wheel, as we discussed earlier. Then you go into very specific plants and what they could be used for. So that would be a wonderful thing to delve into, Emma. One plant that I love so much is hawthorn, because although hawthorn herbally, we talk about it as being something that supports the heart. And in fact, there are many studies that show that it increases the strength of contraction of the heart muscle. But in my practice with people, I actually use it almost universally more as an adaptogenic herb. And everybody over 50, unless they're on a whole range of heart medications, which it could possibly interact with, would be very wise to take hawthorn because it's calming and strengthening. What do you go into with awakening the mythos, the spirit of hawthorn?
Yes, hawthorn, one of my favorite plants, trees as well. And so hawthorn is our heart medicine, as you've just outlined. And it's the heart medicine on both the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual level. So when we've got a physical healing quality within a plant, that's reflected in the metaphysical healing quality as well. And so with hawthorn, there's this real beautiful peace that I get when I work with hawthorn. So when I take hawthorn medicine, it really sinks me down into this really deep, beautiful peace and calm and serenity that allows me to dive into the kind of the wounding of the heart, feeling safe. And so it really holds you in a safe space while you can do that.
And how would you use it? Like when you say using hawthorn medicine, would you just think of hawthorn, look at a picture of it, make it into a tea, an extract, or what does that mean to you?
All of those things.
Okay.
So it completely depends. I work with plant essences a lot. So I work with the vibrational medicine of hawthorn frequently. I work with hawthorn tincture, because the hawthorn berry tincture is just so delicious.
Isn't it?
Yeah, is what is my favorite tincture. So
I know people, my partner on radio and television and as a co-author, Dr. Eugene Zamperone, he loves to use super concentrated hawthorn, which is almost like a paste. And he uses it in baking and things like that as a thickening and flavoring agent.
Wow, I've not heard that before.
See, there's always more to learn.
There is. There is, absolutely. And what better way to take your medicine is to have it included in your food. You know, medicine should be tasting good, and the body will absorb it and much better. It's more bioavailable when we actually love taking the medicine. You know, so beautiful to include it in cookery.
But that's, you know, using it as things that, like you talk about in your book as well, in terms of essence remedies, and people may have heard of the Bach, or I imagine you say Bach. How do you say it for Bach flower remedies? Bach, right?
Bach remedies.
Bach.
Yeah. Bach,
because from England, that's how they say it, and you are, and I'm sure that's the authentic, correct way. Although in the U.S. they say Bach, wrong way. Anyway, you know, the nice thing about those essence remedies, regardless of which ones you use, I think is because it does save plant material. And really, when there's a concept which Pam is very involved with, who wrote the introduction to your book, in terms of, you know, promoting the saving of endangered species, that's one of the ways around it.
Absolutely. And, you know, the more you work with a plant with the intention of working with the spirit of the plant, because, you know, when we work with plants, it's all about intention. And when you work with the intention to connect with the soul force, the spirit of the plant, then the more you take that medicine, the more time you spend with that plant, the more time you nurture the relationship and between you and that plant, then you get to the point when, like you touched on earlier, where you don't actually need to always to take the medicine of the plant. You can actually just call on the vibratory resonance of that plant that you know so well because you've got this strong relationship to enact and deliver, if you like, healing gifts. So, for example, I could call on the spirit of hawthorn to really help me if I am feeling overwhelmed or if I'm feeling anxious about something, to really bring that inner peace. Or I can call on mugwort to bring me some grounding. And so it really avoids having to take anything from nature, but just literally work with the resonance of the plant, the vibration of the plant. And I really think that this is where we're moving to, and this great shift in consciousness that we're all going through, that the planet is going through at the moment, that we're all going to be, it's going to be much easier for people to connect to the spirits of the plants and work with them in this way so that we can foster regeneration of our lands.
Yeah, and we certainly do need to start thinking about that if we want to remain on this planet as a viable species, that's for sure. So I do want to tell people, is the best place to find you, is it the website plantconsciousness.com?
That is the best one. I do have a book, journeyswithplantspirits.com, a website for my book, but plantconsciousness.com, you can also access the book through there.
Well, you have done so much deep research in this area. You know, you're super well educated. And what made you be brought to actually like Tibetan Buddhism as a study?
You know, I lived overseas for a long, long time, about 15 years. And during that time, I lived in the Middle East. And I got very depressed working and living in the middle of a desert. And it's a very money-orientated environment. And I was very depressed. It was very soulless for me. And so I decided to move to India from there and take some time off to really discover myself. I've already been interested in yoga for a long time, in meditation since I was young. I knew about the chakra system. I knew about different healing methodologies. But I really needed to move into a place of embodying that and working with that on a daily basis. And so I went to India to discover that.
And you were successful? It had to do with like a connection to that particular place and what was going on there in terms of spiritual teachings?
That's right. So I moved up to Dharamsala, to McLeod Ganj, where the Dalai Lama lives. And I studied at his temple for a number of months in the dialectic center there. And I also undertook lots of meditation retreats and silent retreats, etc., to just really dive into the realm of meditation. And then I also discovered all these wonderful Tibetan practices of things like dream yoga, which is a form of lucid dreaming, and just thought this was absolutely amazing. And I couldn't get enough of it. And so that's how I kind of approached Tibetan Buddhism through India, really. And then while I was on retreat there, I saw that you could do a master's degree in Italy, in Tuscany, for 2 years at a Buddhist institute. So I moved there to undertake a master's degree, a practicing master's degree, so that I could really immerse myself in the essence of Tibetan Buddhism. I find it quite difficult because it's got such a strong cultural wrapping, but I really went for the essence of the teachings and what the Buddha really had to teach us about the nature of reality. And so that really stood me in good stead, understanding the nature of the mind when it came to working with the plants and healing.
Well, it's a very important topic because even on the news today, they were talking about the fact that as we completely destroy millions of plants and cut down the rainforest rapidly, which there doesn't seem to be any thought about stopping, but at least there's a thought about stopping it. On the regular news this morning, I saw a piece about how that will lead to basically, make it an unlivable planet. So bringing in the consciousness of those plants and animals that are being destroyed are also so relevant.
Absolutely. We have to get to understand that the spirits that work through the plants and trees are very powerful, and we've forgotten how to connect with them. We've forgotten their relevance. We've forgotten that they're here to help us. They're here to promote life in all its different forms and functions, and we can't live here without them. We rely so much on the plants. We rely on plants for our food, to breathe, to clothe us. For every aspect of our life is dependent on plants, and so we have to remember this partnership, this co-creational relationship that we have with plants and therefore with the earth. And
well,
I want to separate.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank you for being our guest today, Emma Farrell, who is the author of Journeys with Plant Spirits, as well as many of the things that she does. You can find her at plantconsciousness.com. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For more information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, the Natural Nurse at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.